Still in quarantine, I'm Richard Rellis here with columnist Bob Robb, and Congressman David Schweikert has himself a shiny, brand new SAV. That's not an SUV, that's an SAV, Statement of Alleged Violations. Bob, you've read the thing. You still have questions and things that voters should be concerned about.
Well, it's a pretty thoroughgoing report, and Schweikert has agreed to the findings, and there's enough in them that certainly it should raise questions in voters' minds. I believe there's a larger unanswered question that gets to the heart as to whether the violations are of sufficient magnitude that even Republican voters should regard them as disqualifying. And I think Schweikert has more explaining and more documentation that he ought to provide to his constituents.
Yeah, and it gets confusing, and you do a good job teasing it out in the column, but there's a loan that is on the books but was never made. Then it appears it was asked to be repaid back. It seems as if it's unclear if the request was to be paid back for the fictitious loan. All we know is that the real loan was paid back, but you wonder whether that kind of shading over the books may have happened in previous campaigns where Schweikert might have loaned himself some money.
Well, I think it raises a question that Schweikert ought to answer and resolve. What happened was in the 2012 bitter primary campaign between Schweikert and Ben Quayle, the Schweikerts purported and reported a loan of $100,000 to the campaign. In fact, the loan was never made. Subsequently, they did make a $130,000 loan. After the election, Mrs. Schweikert asked that the Schweikerts be repaid. It was unclear in the record whether she was asking for only the $130,000 that was actually loaned to be repaid, or whether at that point in time the campaign only thought it had $230,000 that were owed, and whether she was asking for the whole amount. If that was the case, then in essence the Schweikerts would be seeking to be personally enriched from campaign contributions. That didn't happen. Only the $130,000 was repaid. The other fictitious $100,000 was subsequently forgiven, although that wasn't the appropriate way to deal with it. But over the course of his congressional career, his political career, Schweikert has loaned and be repaid over $600,000 to his campaigns and from his campaigns. And his response when asked whether any of those might have been inadvertent or phony was, I don't believe so, which is hardly reassuring. So I think that you're left with this big question that gets at the heart of whether he sought to personally enrich himself, that Schweikert needs to provide documentation that all the loans for which he has been repaid over the year were in fact legit, since there was one that was not legit, and there was at least some indication that repayment for it, even though it wasn't legit, might have been sought. At least there wasn't a clarity on the part of the Schweikerts as to what they were being asked to be paid in terms of loan repayments from their campaign coffers.
Is there a reason why you think he didn't make it abundantly clear to the ethics committee or to Arizona voters thus far?
I think there's a possibility he may be trying to protect his wife, who was deeply involved in his campaign operations at this point in time. In order to cover the fictitious loan, there were fictitious expenditures recorded to his direct mail firm, so that the cash balance that was reported to the FEC matched the dollars that was actually in the account. There wasn't in the investigation a chasing to ground as to who did that or why. So there was a lot that's kind of dodgy that was occurring during this period of time when Schweikert's wife was managing the books for most intents and purposes. And one of the things that Schweikert got out of accepting the SAV is that the committee said the investigation is done, and that spared his wife from being interviewed. Now that's complete speculation, trying to read between the lines of the report, but it would be one explanation as to why Schweikert remained fairly evasive about this particular incident nearly a decade later.
And I guess if he were to wish to clear it up, Bob, I guess as the kids would say, your DMs are open. Although you probably don't check your DMs that much, you probably should just email you.
Well, I think he does need to establish that all the reimbursements that he's gotten over the years for loans were for real loans. I think that's a legitimate question that's out there that he should resolve.